Hello, welcome to Heather's Library. Today I'm going to be covering Wuthering Heights. I chose this book because, surprisingly, I've never had to read it for school, and I know I'm going to get roasted for this, but I love the Twilight series, and I recently reread it, and I realized that this book is mentioned quite often in the series, so I figured I'd give it a shot, and also I wanted to break up kind of the books that I have covered here already, because I usually just cover young adult series, kind of fantasy, and I wanted to break up that pattern a little bit and go for something that's considered a little bit more classic and a little bit more esteemed in the literature world. So I'm going to first cover the characters in the style of storytelling, and then I will go through a chronological recap of the book and go from there. So the characters. First off, we have Heathcliff. He is cold and mysterious. He's interesting because he's a quite dynamic character. He's kind of the underdog. At least that's what we are meant to believe at first. Then we have Catherine. And just for the sake of making things easier to understand as you're listening to this, if you haven't read the book before, I will refer to Catherine as Catherine, or Big Kathy, and I will refer to her daughter as Kathy, Little Catherine. So Catherine, she's the older Catherine of the story. She is fiery and she's kind of childish in a lot of ways. She has a lot of passion and she really speaks up for what she believes in, and she doesn't hold anything back. She kind of doesn't have a filter. That's what makes her both lovable and a little bit upsetting at times. And then we have Hindley. He is Catherine's older brother. He is more proper than her. He's a little bit distanced from Catherine and Heathcliff. He kind of wants to be set apart from them, wants to be a step above. Then we have Kathy, Little Kathy. She is Catherine's daughter. She won't come in until about the second half of the story, but I just thought I would introduce all the characters now. She retains a lot of Catherine's qualities, despite never really knowing her at all. It is actually quite surprising how similar she is to her mother. And then we have Isabella. Isabella is posh, she's proper, she's quite young. I think she's younger than Catherine, even. According to the timeline here, she lives at the Grange with Edgar, her brother, who is a little bit older than Isabella. He is described as being pretty and handsome, and I would describe him as like kind of high maintenance, proper, posh, like Isabella. We have Linton. He is Isabella's son. He will be Isabella's son later on. He's sickly, he's annoying to me, I don't like him, and he's very high maintenance. So that's, I guess I could cover Nellie, or Ellen. She is the servant, the housemaid, the housekeeper. She's the one that we are going to be hearing the story from, mostly. She's the narrator here. Well, she's kind of a narrator and a narrator. I'll get to it in a second. And then we have Mr. Lockwood. He is the tenant at Thrushcross Grange currently. He's also kind of the narrator. I'll explain. So the storytelling, we're reading somebody being told a story, and that can get kind of confusing. So Mr. Lockwood is the tenant at the Grange currently, and he asks Nellie to recap some things for him, to give him a kind of a history of things that happened at the Heights. So both Mr. Lockwood and Nellie are narrating this, but Mr. Lockwood is more directly narrating. He's the one writing this down, but Nellie has the best memory I have ever heard of in my life, so Nellie should get all the credit for this, really, when you think about it. So Mr. Lockwood is a tenant at the Grange, and he goes over to meet his landlord, who is Mr. Heathcliff, at the Heights, and Mr. Heathcliff is not a good man. He's not a gentle host. He is very annoyed at Lockwood's presence here. So, unfortunately, a storm came in and Lockwood actually got snowed in at the Heights. And he has a strange experience on his night there. He ends up sleeping in a closet, and he can see that there are scratch marks and writing on this windowsill of this closet that he's staying in with the name Catherine. And that's where he becomes curious of Heathcliff and what he has to say for himself and what he's done in his past, why he's like the way he is. So he asks Nellie to explain Heathcliff's weird behavior. So Nellie begins to explain to Mr. Lockwood the entire story of Heath and Catherine's life. And I just want to say again, Nellie's memory is absolutely insane, but I guess if she doesn't really do anything else besides work, which that's what it seems like to me, then this is her life, really. So I guess that would explain why she has such a good memory of everything. So as we begin, Heath is adopted by Father Earnshaw, and Father Earnshaw is the dad to Catherine and Henley. He comes home one night, and he has Heath wrapped in his arms. Catherine gets attached very quickly to Heathcliff, and this puts Henley off. Henley becomes a little bit jealous, agitated, and this is where he wants to be set apart from them because their bond is so strong to each other that they become so childish in their antics, and they kind of run off, and they annoy Henley a little bit. As Henley gets older, he gets sent off to college, and the bond between Heathcliff and Catherine deepens as they become more alone, Henley's not around, and as Father Earnshaw dies. Whenever Earnshaw dies, Henley comes back for the funeral, and he has a wife. And that is very surprising because Henley was not a pleasant person to be around in the beginning of this story. So it's surprising that anybody would find him so pleasant that they could marry him. And Henley's wife is actually really nice, and she kind of turned Henley into a more personable guy, turned him more fun, more loving. So here is the point in the story where we have the first encounter at the Grange within a story. So Catherine and Heath run off and they're playing, and Catherine gets bit by a dog, and the owners at the Grange, or the current tenants, request that she stays so that she can get help and that they can tend to her wounds and call for the doctor and whatever. And Heath is he gets thrown out, he gets kicked out of the house. And Heath is so protective that he gets really upset by this, and he actually never leaves the Grange. He stays outside and watches her from the window. He says in the book, "I resumed my station as spy, because if Catherine had wished to return, I intended shattering their great glass panes to 1,000,000 fragments unless they let her out." And I really love that quote. He seems very much protective of her. He seems possessive, and he just seems like he really wants to make sure that she's okay, because this is a different time, I know, but I totally feel where he's coming from. I would not be comfortable with my friend or my adopted whatever being in a house with strangers and being told that I can't come in. I would have some words with them. I would have some things for them if they said that. That's just, to me in this day and age, that's just wild that I think he was calm in this scenario, but I love that he cares about her that much. It shows their bond is really deep. But eventually Heathcliff leaves after that night, and he goes to the Heights. And Catherine ends up staying at the Grange for 5 weeks, which is insane. I understand this is a different time, but she stays with him for 5 weeks. That's wild. So during these 5 weeks, she changes a lot. She becomes a lot more proper and a lot more fitting for the role of a woman in this society. And Heath's relationship with Catherine declines greatly after she returns, just because she changes as a person, honestly. From here, he's engaged with Edgar Linton, who is the son of one of the owners of the Grange that helped take care of Catherine. Edgar, like I said, he's a pretty boy, he's high maintenance, he's rich, he's very, very proper, and it's clear that Edgar takes a liking to Catherine in the beginning. Heathcliff does not like that, obviously, And that's why he's compared to Edgar a lot, because Heathcliff and Edgar are kind of after the same thing here. They're both wanting Catherine's attention and affection. And it gets so bad, actually, that a confrontation ensues between Heathcliff and Edgar, where Heathcliff actually throws applesauce at Edgar because Edgar is just being so vexing to him. And it's very confusing for Catherine. Catherine actually becomes dissociated in the moment because she's hurt over Heath's treatment. Because she can see that Edgar and Isabella aren't treating him like she would treat him personally. They aren't responding to him like she does. They don't see that they have a good friendship, that they have a good foundation for a relationship. They don't understand why she's so bonded to him. And that really upsets Catherine. But Catherine has a pivoting point here where she has to decide what life she wants for herself. So from here, we kind of have a time jump to the summer of 1778, and that is a year. That's just a year time jump here. Heathcliff, his self-esteem goes way down the hole. He feels bad about himself. Hindley and his wife have a son named Hareton, and during birth, or after birth, I can't quite remember, his wife, Frances, dies. And Hindley completely changes after the death of his wife, because his wife was the one who changed his behavior, who made him feel happy, who made him seem fun and loving and a caring father. And Hindley just completely does a 180 here. He becomes so sad, so forlorn, so cold. He doesn't want anything to do with the involvement of his son, Hareton. But Hareton is taken care of, thankfully, because of the glorious amounts of servants and help that they have. And Catherine herself ends up kind of playing with him, whatever. And I believe that this is a foreshadowing of Heath's future, because Heath turns into a completely different person after his relationship with Catherine is kind of officially done for, or his hope for a romantic future is officially done for. Heath becomes a different person. So I think this is a foreshadowing of what Heath will become. And I think that's why it was included in the story, just to show that history will repeat itself. So, Catherine kind of becomes two-faced, to say, I guess not in a bad way, but I think she's just feeling a lot of pressure from everybody in her life. She can't really find a balance between who she wants to be and who she is. So she wants Edgar's affection, obviously, because he is rich and he is in good society. He's pretty and he has all these things and he's luxurious. She obviously wants his affection. It would mean a lot to her. But she also wants Heath's bond and friendship still. She doesn't want to leave him behind. But she can't find a good balance between the two, and that really stresses her out. And she's a different person when she's with Heath than when she's with Edgar. So as Catherine becomes more integrated with the Lintons, Heath's mental health declines. He is obviously struggling to keep Catherine the same person as she is, to keep her with him, and Catherine is struggling to find that balance for their relationship, trying to find a footing, and I think they are both afraid of losing each other, so much so that they don't want to say how they really feel about each other. They just want to dance around it, and their anger comes out in unwanted ways. So Edgar and Catherine get engaged, but she reveals that she loves Heathcliff to Nellie, and this is kind of where the common, if they just communicated, everything would be fine, romantic trope happens. And I hate that trope just because it can prevent so much, as we'll see in the story. But this seems a little bit less played out than most romantic novels or stories, just because this isn't like a minor miscommunication that blows up in their face. This is a huge thing that Catherine doesn't know what to do with, so it doesn't bother me that much. But Catherine does reveal that she loves Heathcliff, even though she's engaged to Edgar. She tells Nellie Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same. I think that's beautiful. That's absolutely a gorgeous way of putting it, that like you're tied to somebody in that intimate way, that you guys are soulmates without saying you're my soulmate. I think that's beautiful, and I love that, and I'll probably use that sometime. So her plan, her thinking here for going forward with the engagement with Edgar is that she wants support for Heathcliff while she is still in a relationship with Edgar. She's hoping to have the two of them, she's hoping to have her cake and eat it too, basically. And upon hearing this news that she's marrying Edgar, Heath leaves. He just ditches. He's out. He doesn't want to be around it. Can't stand seeing Catherine be with somebody who's not him. So another time jump. This is a few years. Heath comes back and he has money. Nobody has any idea how he got that money. Nobody's wanting to know how he got that money, honestly, because they don't want their image of Heathcliff to be tarnished if he did something really bad. So, this is a description of how Heath comes back and he sits with Catherine at the Grange. This is their first meeting back. He took a seat opposite to Catherine, who kept her gaze on him as if she feared that he would vanish were she to remove it. And this makes Edgar very jealous and unhappy. This is when Catherine's marriage starts to go downhill. And the thing is, Edgar is right to feel the way he does, because Heathcliff is obviously in love with her, and Catherine is obviously in love with him, and for some reason, they can't just be apart. They can't just let each other go, because they love each other. And Edgar's completely validated here because of the way they act toward each other. The way they act is completely inappropriate because Catherine is in a relationship. She's married to Edgar, but they still push boundaries. So eventually, because Heathcliff is around Isabella and the Lintons so much, Isabella falls in love with Heath. She's only 18, and this causes a huge rift in Heath's relationship with Catherine, because Catherine doesn't trust him, because she doesn't know how he got his money. Nobody knows how he got his money and why he's so established now. And Heathcliff really seems to think about Isabella's feelings for him, and it's suspicious. This really puts a wedge between Catherine and Heathcliff, because Catherine's obviously jealous, but she doesn't want to say that. She's going to give a million other reasons why she doesn't want Heathcliff to marry or go for Isabella at all, but she's never going to admit that she's in love with him and that she's jealous of Isabella. So, in response to this fight that they're having about Isabella, Heathcliff says to Catherine, "I compliment you on your taste, and that is the slavering, shivering thing you preferred to me." He's referring to Edgar during their argument, and Edgar's just slinking away in a chair. Edgar looks weak and powerless. At least that's how it's described. Edgar is just sitting back. He's not passionate like Heath is. He's not strong as Heathcliff is. So I was just reading this and I was just feeling so awkward. I felt secondhand embarrassment, because imagine you're married and your husband is in the room, but you're in love with somebody else who is also in the room, and you guys are both skirting around the whole reason you're having an argument, which is you can't tell each other that you're in love with each other because you're both kind of tied to these other people that you are committed or intimate with. Like, it's so awkward, and I don't know why Edgar is just sitting there just taking this. Maybe it's because Catherine is so pig-headed and strong that he's afraid to have an argument with her, and he would rather not have an argument with her and be that loving, perfect, easygoing husband than be Heathcliff. But man, that is so awkward. If I was Edgar, I would not even want to be in the room. I would just say, you know what? Y'all gotta do what you gotta do. I'm gonna go be over here. I'm gonna keep my peace over here. I don't want to do this. But why he's in the room, I don't know. But Heathcliff really, really just called her out, and she doesn't care for it. She isolates herself in a room with no food for 3 days because of this. And it really broke my heart reading this, because Catherine describes that she wishes she could return to childhood and that things could be the way they were, just because it got so complicated now. And they feel like they're hurting each other and other people too. So Heathcliff and Isabella run away to get married, and we find out that Isabella actually is not happy in her marriage because she writes a letter to Nellie from the Heights. And it sounds like hell and heartbreak. It's awful. In this letter, she describes that Heath has revealed he tricked her out of hate for the Lintons for what they turned Kathy into. He will never forgive her or her family, and he's going to punish her and her family for that with this marriage. So here is when my view on Heathcliff took a huge 180. He turns into the villain of the story, and that's not what I was expecting. I was just expecting a tragic tale of two lovers who never got to become more than friends. But no, this is cruel. So Isabella says her treatment and her conditions are so bad that she wishes to die. And Heathcliff is just cruel and manipulative and unhinged, to be honest. And it makes me wonder, and not that any of these actions are representative of what a good relationship should look like or what love should look like, but it makes me wonder if Heathcliff loves Catherine more than Catherine loves him, because Catherine just kind of went on with her life. Catherine just moved on and accepted that she would never see Heathcliff again whenever he ran away, but Heathcliff had this whole plan. He got money to marry this girl so that he could make Catherine feel pain and he could punish this family. He had a whole master plan. And Catherine was just like sitting back, just married to this dude she doesn't love. Like, I think Heathcliff might love Catherine more. But at the same time, they both kind of went crazy after they married other people. And they both drive each other insane. And they both drive themselves insane. So I don't know. It just seems like Heathcliff is more passionate about how he loves her and how he hates the Lintons. I'm not really sure what the balance of their relationship is here. But eventually they have a passionate and painful conversation about who hurt the other. In this conversation, Heath says that Catherine broke her own heart by marrying Edgar and that Heath had nothing to do with her pain because she inflicted it on herself, which to a point I agree to, but at the same time, how was Catherine ever expected to turn down a proposal from a nobleman and marry Heathcliff instead? Like, what was their life going to be like? You know, like how would they have afforded things? Where was the security there? But I do agree that there could have been some way where she didn't have to marry Edgar. And in this conversation, they also get really touchy. I can't quite remember if they kiss here, but they're definitely like cuddling on a couch here. And I was just like, dang, Nellie. Nellie is watching this happen and Nellie is not even doing anything. She's just like, okay, this is happening. This is a married woman and a married man, and they're not married to each other, but they're getting touchy. Okay. Like, okay, Nellie. Nellie's quiet about this. Okay. So later on, pretty soon after, actually, Catherine dies during childbirth. She gives birth to a baby girl named Kathy. And Heathcliff becomes even crazier here because the love of his life just died and he didn't get to love her openly. He says, "You said I killed you. Haunt me then." I think that is really, really powerful because he loved her so much that he wishes he would be haunted by her spirit if that meant he get to feel her or be with her. In a twisted way, that is beautiful. Isabella moves out / escapes from the Heights, and she moves to the south of London. She has a kid named Linton, and Kathy is kept to the Grange because Edgar does not want her near the Heights. Edgar does not want her near Heathcliff, so he makes sure that she stays within a certain radius of the Grange. But Isabella gets sick, and Edgar has to go tend to her and prepare for taking Linton home with him. So during Edgar's trip to go figure out all of Isabella's affairs, Kathy actually visits the Heights for the first time. And she discovers here that Hareton is her cousin, and she's very shocked because Hareton is a representation of what Heathcliff was. Hareton is more of a servant, more of the help here, and Kathy cannot fathom why somebody who would be blood related to her would have to do that. So she's very shocked, and it's riveting, honestly, that Kathy lived 4 miles away from her blood relatives. Kathy has no idea about the history, about the backstory, because Edgar has kept her in the dark, except for Heathcliff is a bad person. Don't deal with him. So eventually, Isabella dies, and Edgar returns with Linton, but he's only kept at their house for one night. Linton is forced back to the Heights, or I guess forced to go to the Heights, because Heathcliff heard the news of Linton coming, and so he said, I have to take my son. And Edgar is very upset by this, as is Catherine, but Edgar more so because he understands the full history. And also, Linton is a sickly, weak boy. Linton is very skinny and pale and lightheaded and weak. Just not fit at all, not healthy. I'm not sure what he had. There was no specific illness mentioned, but there was definitely something going on with him. And so after this long trip back to the only family he knows he has to be uprooted. And he's very sad about it. Kathy's very sad about it. It's very troubling. He's sickly, he's dealing with grief, and he's adjusting to life without his mom, but with this stranger who is also his uncle that he's told he's supposed to love. It's awful. It makes me really sad. And really mad at Heath, because Heath orchestrates this whole thing. He orchestrates a romance between Kathy and Linton. And it's twisted. Edgar does not support this romance, but Heathcliff wants it so bad. He wants them to marry because he wants to be the controller, the inheritor of the property at the Grange and the Heights, and he wants to secure his place. So Edgar doesn't support this romance, but it doesn't really matter because Edgar gets sick pretty quickly, and Heathcliff tricks Kathy and Nellie into his house at the Heights by saying that they need to walk Linton home during one of their meetings with Linton. Linton was just used the entire time in the story. It's really sad. So is Kathy, but she finds happiness eventually. So Heathcliff tricks Kathy and Nellie into going into the Heights in the house, and he actually holds them captive, and he forces Kathy to marry Linton while Edgar is dying, while her own father is dying. He only cares about the marriage, and it's sick how he uses that to his advantage. It's awful. And Kathy even says, I'll marry Linton willingly. I don't know why you have to do this. I don't know why you're doing this to me. I will marry him willingly, but just please let me go see my dad before he dies. Let me be with him. So that was awful and disturbing to read, and it's clear to me that Heathcliff holds no significance for death at all. He actually disturbs Kathy's grave so that his will be by hers in the future. And he also reveals that he feels Catherine's spirit with him while he's at the Heights. It's very troubling, the things he does for love. It's very troubling. So, after Kathy marries Linton, he dies pretty soon. While he's dying, or after he dies, Kathy says, he's safe, and I'm free. I should feel well, but you have left me so long to struggle against death alone that I feel and see only death. I feel like death. That is so upsetting and powerful and just true to the person that Heathcliff has become. He does not care about other people's feelings but his own. He will do whatever it takes to secure himself at the top here. He will do whatever it takes to secure himself a place at Wuthering Heights so that he can be close to Catherine. It's disgusting, and I understand it, but it's not right. It's awful. And it's indicative of what Kathy has become, and Kathy never saw this for herself. She never saw this for her life. So after Linton dies, Heath actually inherits everything in his will because he threatened Linton, and Linton was obviously scared, so he wrote him in his will to take everything. And I think this is where we get to see a little bit more of the relationship between Kathy and Hareton. And this is also another theme, or another addition to the theme that history will repeat itself, because there are so many similarities between the Linton, Kathy, Hareton love triangle and the Edgar, Heathcliff, and Catherine love triangle here. And it's obvious that Heath can see this, and he takes advantage of this because he married Kathy and Linton. So Linton is like a representation of Edgar, and Kathy is obviously Catherine's modern version, I suppose. So Heath obviously saw that and took advantage of that, forced Kathy to be unhappy so that Linton would give everything away to him. And like he said, he's going to punish the Linton family for as long as he can for what they did to Catherine. So this is where, in the story, Lockwood becomes involved. He actually delivers a letter from Nellie to Kathy at the Heights, just saying that, Nellie is aware of her and Nellie misses her and she hopes Kathy's okay. So eventually Nellie returns to the Heights. Heathcliff is sick. I think mentally he's becoming a little bit deranged here. He's not eating as much. He's seemingly in euphoria, seemingly really happy. He eventually dies. And at this point, Hareton and Kathy are engaged. Kathy is teaching Hareton how to read, and they have a really good relationship. It seems like Hareton and Kathy are the idealization of what Heathcliff and Catherine should have been. So I'm rooting for them. It really is awful that they had to go through all of this to get to what should have been in the first place, really. But they have a good relationship, and they seem really happy. They're engaged at this point. And the book ends with Mr. Lockwood walking past the Grange, walking to the Grange, past the graveyards, reflecting on Heathcliff's tombstone and Catherine's tombstone after the funeral. It's very poetic, really. I really was shocked by the content of this story. I have read some other Bronte work, and this is just so unexpected. I don't know how else to describe it. It's so different than everything else that was its time. It's such an outlier of literature in this era. Even today, I would say that this is a shocking story. This is crazy. This is so much content. I actually struggled to make this episode. I had originally 8 pages of notes, and I spent an hour condensing it into 4 pages of notes, and I still feel like there are things that I could expand on, but I won't, because if I did, this episode would be 2 hours long, and I don't want that. This is considered a classic for a reason, because there's so much. There is a lot of significance here. There is so much going on in this book, and the theme that history repeats itself is so prevalent. There's a lot of poetic justice in this book. I think, as much as I hate Heathcliff, I think he is a really smart and committed person. I'm still in shock of what happened. I was not expecting this. Going in, I had people recommend this to me. I read a synopsis of this book before I got into it, and I'm still kind of reeling from the roller coaster I went through reading this. Every chapter was something different. Every chapter shocked me. I think that's what a good book does, though. It keeps you hanging in there. And I was really invested in the characters and in the story that was being told here. I thought this is also a really interesting way to tell a story, because you have Mr. Lockwood hearing a story, and then we're getting our information from a second narrator. I thought that is very interesting, and if you can tell a story like that without it getting too muddled, that is a huge, huge impression that you made on me and on other readers. It's a great accomplishment. I really like this book, and I would recommend it to anybody who is interested in romance or interested in in realizing different themes in poetic justice. I think it's a really good book, and I can understand why so many people rave about this book and why it's so talked about still today. I think it's very relevant, and it will continue to be relevant for a very, very long time. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're still listening, thanks for listening. Hopefully next couple of episodes I will have a guest on, and we will be talking about a more modern piece. Thank you for listening.